Hello guys, welcome to another video. My name's Mel Chadwick and today we are going to be doing part 2 of the Lyra Aquacolor Water Soluble crayons, and we're going to be this time testing them on white paper. So if you've seen part 1, you'll see that I tested all of my Lyra colours, swatched them all onto black paper, and then I did a couple of examples of using them on black paper, one totally dry without any water and then two with water added. So today I'm going to do pretty much the same thing, but I'm going to be using white paper. The paper that I'll be using is this one, Bockingford. This is just a traditional watercolour paper and it's A4 size and it's quite smooth. I've used this before. I used it for when I swatched my Inktense, Derwent Inktense pencils, and so I'm going to use this to swatch the Lyra Aquacolor crayons. So here are all my crayons. Now the eagle-eyed amongst you will spot there is a little space here because I went out and took some of my favourite colours with me on the weekend to do some sketching, and I love using my aqua colours in my sketchbook, and unfortunately this colour here, which I think according to my chart was raw umber, yes, so the raw umber I think is probably left on a cliff edge somewhere. So it's a little bit disappointing when I lose one of my favourite colours. But that kind of actually leads me on to the question, what happens when one of the colours I use it all up, or like, you know, I've lost one? How can I replace it? So I did have a little look. Unfortunately, you can't buy these open stock. You have to almost buy a complete set again if you want to replace like for like. What I'm going to do instead is to probably buy a similar product. So Caran d'Ache also do a range of water soluble crayons, and so what I'm going to do is when I run out of a colour, I'm going to kind of try and find a similar colour in the Caran d'Ache Neocolor 2 range, and then basically replace these with the Neocolor. Anyway, let's go back to what we'll do today. We're going to swatch all of the colours on the white paper, and I'll show you how they look both dry and then wet. They're going onto the paper really nicely and feel really quite creamy. And especially as this is smooth paper. Just a little tip here, if you want to sharpen your crayons, actually I use a double barrel sharpener, so that one is your normal size for pencils, but if you put it in the bigger one and just gently turn it, and you'll find that actually they sharpen really well. So that you can actually get a really good point on them. Okay, so I'm now going to wet my brush and just gently add water to the right swatch so that we can see how these look when water is added on white paper. These are definitely behaving like watercolours. Nice, once you've wet it and it activated the crayon, actually really nice soft watercolour. There we go. Let's have a little bit of a closer look. As you can see, there are some really nice colours here, really bright. They look so different actually when they're on the white paper as opposed to the black paper. We haven't really got any washed out looking ones. And that kind of depends on how much water you use as well. Obviously if you use more water you're going to dilute the pigment, but really nice colours. You can see peacock blue is very bright. Actually most of the blues are very bright and that seem quite pigmented. And the reds as well, a nice range of reds. Actually some of them you could still see a bit of the texture in there. I quite like that because it just gives a little bit more interest to the colour. So there are the swatches, dry and wet. So I have masked up my piece of paper with washi tape, and that will just give me a really nice clean border. And I'm going to be using actually as a reference the image that I drew on the black paper, because I think that will be a good comparison then, and we can see then how these crayons look on black and white and then also with water. So I thought I'd stick to the same image, and this was originally inspired by Sandy Hester's still life that she set up for painting from, and I'll leave a link to her channel down below. Okay, so I'm going to approach it pretty much the same way that I did in part one. I'm just going to start by drawing the main shapes with the crayons. It does feel like I'm working in reverse now that I've done this picture on black, working on it on white. It really feels a little bit different in that you're working with highlights rather than shadows. I'm having to press actually quite hard as well just to get a smoother colour. Colour is super bright though. Okay, here we go. I have prepared 2 pieces, very rough kind of sketches. So I just wanted to get the crayons down and kind of how I would use them in my sketchbook, which is kind of quite scribbly, try to get loose shapes and colours on the page. So I am going to use this one as the dry, keep this one as the dry sketch, and I'm going to use this one as my watercolour one. So I'm going to paint over this one with water and see how we get on. I'm really looking forward to actually working on the white paper because I think it's going to look quite different to the black paper. Okay, so I'm going to start adding water to the background to begin with. I probably am going to treat this very similar to the piece that I did on the black paper. So I'll cover all of it. So it's a similar way of working. I've got 2 colours here, so the grey and the blue, sky blue. And they kind of blend together when you add the water. I don't want to get rid of the white though, because I think that's quite nice in the sketch, so I'm going to try and be careful not to spread the paint out too much. And this part's going to be interesting because I've put lots of different colours in this vase or bottle, so I don't want to over mix or over blend, so I'll lose some of the colours. So I'm just touching it lightly. Interesting, the consistency is actually a little bit more like gouache, and the less water I use, the thicker it is. So there we go. I am going to just let this dry now, and then I will come back to you with the tape removed from both of them. We'll have a look, see how they compare, maybe have some comments about what works, what doesn't, and it would be also great to bring back the sketches that I did on the black paper as well, and then we can have an overall look at how these water-soluble crayons fared on both the black and the white. Guys, here is the colour chart that I made on the white, and you can see how lovely and bright all of the colours are, and none of the colours are washed out when you add the water to them, maybe apart from the brown ochre, but it all depends on how much water you add. So if you don't want it too light, then just don't use as much water, and if you want it more like really a loose wash, then probably use more water. So let me show you now the finished piece with just the crayon on its own. Okay, so you can see you've got all of the texture there. It's quite a scribbly kind of sketch, but I just love the colours. Look how bright they are and vibrant they are. And because you're working, or because I'm working on the white, you've got those highlights coming through, and it's quite a nice and bold sketch. And now I'm going to show you the watercolour version. As you can see, again, it's still quite bright and bold. Let's have a look at the details. So you can see that it has like a quality which is a little bit like gouache. So you've got a little bit of grain in there. It's only slight grain, but it definitely looks a little bit thicker than watercolour. But that's also down to how much water I used on top. So it's got like quite a very soft finish to it. And in contrast, you've got this one, which is a bit more chunky. Definitely, you can feel the energy of it. So there we go, 2 ways with those water soluble crayons, and you end up with quite different styles. I think my preference again would be the dry watercolour, but I think that's just me. I really like the textures. What would be interesting, and I said this at the end of part 1, to work back on the watercolour one, bring in some of the textures that are here and put them on maybe some of these closer objects, just to kind of give a bit more depth. So I'm going to compare this one now with its counterpart, which I did on the black paper. And you can see, can't you, that although this one does fare well with the colours, this one is a little bit brighter and more vibrant, isn't it? Now look at the comparison with the water, one on black paper and the one on the white paper. This one, you can definitely see that this one has worked a lot better than the one on the black paper. And that's probably all down to the fact that it's on a dark background and you haven't got those bright punchy highlights coming out. So there we have it, part 1 on the black paper, part 2 on the white paper, looking at Lyra Aquacolor wax crayons and swatching them and seeing how they look both dry and wet. I hope that you enjoyed this, guys. Do let me know in the comments which one you prefer. Has it given you some ideas as to what to do with your water soluble crayons if you have them? Thanks so much, guys, for watching, and I will speak to you again very soon.